Roll-ups. A roll-up is generally to help us control our lumbar as we go into a sit-up. So what we're thinking about when we do a roll-up, okay, roll-ups. The idea of the roll-up is to control our pelvis and our spine. So on the way up, we want to go into flexion of the spine, but we're not going to just do it at the neck and the upper back. We're going to do it down here in the lower back. So what I recommend is as you're doing a roll-up, you want to draw the belly or the stomach muscles inward, pushing the lower back into the floor. So you put as much force in the lower back, driving it into the floor. So we're going to come up, the cervical flexion, there's thoracic flexion, and then right here there's a little sticky point. Okay, I tend to have a little extension in my lumbar all the time, so I'm going to have to force myself to drive that lumbar into, or the lower back into the floor as I sit up. And on the way down, the same thing. Drive that lumbar into the floor before we start depending on the upper back and the neck. So again, I'm going to come up, I'm going to flex, and I'm going to keep trying to flex the spine all the way down to the lumbar, to the pelvis as I come up. Once we get to the top, you have some choices. I recommend that you try to get back to neutral. All right, so I'm going to have to change my pelvis position from here, from a posterior tilt and spinal flexion, to now anterior tilt and spinal extension. And if you moved your shoulder blades into protraction, you got to get those shoulder blades back to a neutral position. And then we quickly go back the other way, which is going to start with a pelvic tilt, right? I'm going to posteriorly pelvic tilt, and that's going to help me flex the lumbar. And again, I don't have to depend on this to come down. I can really just push my lower back into the ground and let the neck and the upper back do their job. So up and push that lower back into the ground, come back to neutral, and then again posterior tilt, push that lower back into the ground. Notice my knees might bend, okay? So that's for me to control my pelvis. I may have to bend my knees on the way down so I can get that posterior tilt. I can probably do it with my knees straight too, but I may soften the knees. So either way is okay. If you can keep your knees straight, that's better. But don't try to do that if it's going to affect managing your pelvis. That's more important. So come down, we can bend those knees a little bit to get that posterior pelvic tilt, get the lumbar on the ground. And on the way up, you can do the same thing if needed. You can bend those knees to help get that posterior tilt. And then back to neutral at the top. Notice my knees might bend again. Your knees probably will bend when you're trying to get neutral position at the top because your hamstrings are trying to pull the pelvis the other way. So if I straighten my legs, it's going to dump my pelvis like this. But we want control of the pelvis. So soften the hamstrings by bending the knees so you can get up to this position.